Hey, Big Blue Banter listener. Would you like an extra $500? That's a lot of cash. Go to bluewirepods.com/survey and complete the Blue Wire audience survey about you and your podcast listening habits for a chance to win a $500 gift card. This survey will help create a better advertising experience for audiences and, in turn, help this show. That's bluewirepods.com/survey, where all you have to do is answer some simple questions for a chance to win $500. Make sure to read the full terms and disclaimer, plus complete the survey for a chance to win. BlueWirePods.com/survey. The link is also in the show notes of this episode.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. Today we're here to do two things. We're going to give our brief thoughts on John Mara's comments, the first time the Giants owner spoke so far this season at 2-5. You know how angry he can get. Everybody remembers him slamming chairs in the suites. And then we're also going to preview the Giants-Steelers matchup with a really great guest we're going to get a chance to interview. So we're going to get a chance to talk some scheme and some fun X's and O's stuff. Alex Kozora. So we're very excited for that. But first, let's talk about John Mara, Nick. So I'll recap what we got. What we got wasn't much, but we did get was John Mara essentially saying, I'm not going to give you guys much right now, but I will give you this. I don't foresee us making any changes in season to head coach Brian Daboll or GM Joe Schoen, and I don't foresee us making any changes after the season when it comes to Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, two people who have been on the proverbial hot seat, I would call it, among some Giants fans and just generally speaking among the media up until this point. So any initial thoughts on that before I kind of lead the conversation and get us into some things on this?
I wouldn't expect John Mara to come out and say anything differently, first off. We know John Mara does not want to be this franchise that turns over general managers and turns over coaches. And unfortunately, that's what the New York Giants have been since Tom Coughlin. It happened to McAdoo. It happened to Shermer. It happened to Judge. Each got 2 seasons. Now we're in season 3 of this regime with Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. Now it's a little different. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they came in together. That wasn't necessarily the case under Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge. But regardless of the fact, John Mara didn't want to get rid of Joe Judge after year 2. And it took this rambling 8-minute long press conference after a devastating loss versus the Chicago Bears for John Mara. And I think heavily pushed by the Tisch family, the other owners of this franchise and other influences, discussed with Mara and talked with Mara to get him to fire Joe Judge because they needed a clean slate because Dave Gettleman was already retiring at that point. So John Mara did not want to do that, though. And even after he fired, he's like, I know there's a good coach in Joe Judge, but we have to go in another direction. He did his whole like John Mara thing. So now at this juncture, I wouldn't think, even though they're still in playoff contention, it doesn't seem like it, but mathematically they are, and they're 2-5. Teams have turned around 2-5 seasons in the past. Recently, last year, it's happened, right? I don't think that's going to happen with the Giants, but I would not expect John Mara to come out, Dan, and throw any cold water or put any more pressure on his general manager and his head coach when their seats are hot as hell outside of the building. So that's, I guess, my take on it. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a strong take. I think we're on the same page for the most part here because ultimately, when it comes to John Mara, it's like we've never seen. I'm going to start with Joe Schoen here, Nick. We've never seen him fire GM after 3 years. So this would be basically the first time we've ever seen that happen if it were to happen. Jerry Reese got a long tenure here. Obviously, a Corsi before him with his father, Wellington. And then Dave Gettleman got 4 years to try to fix this thing and put his stamp on it. So it always seemed unlikely to me that he would be gone this offseason. I also think there's some negatives and some positives about Joe Schoen. Process-wise, we've been on board the whole time, Nick. I feel like he has a good process as a general manager, and that's been borne out. I don't think he panics on the trade market. I don't think now some people could say he makes some need-based picks in the draft, and that's a fair assessment. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is a clip circulated yesterday, Nick, from Hard Knocks that I think Monty put out. And it was just interesting to me. It was Joe Schoen breaking down how it's like, look, we're not going to get – it was basically him saying we're likely not to get our quarterback in this draft class. So let's do it like this. My plan will be we'll build out our offensive line in free agency. We'll get our weapon in the draft. and we'll let Daniel Jones play out this season. He said our plan was always to give him he calls it a couple years to kind of prove himself. And that's how the contract was created, right? It's baked in this 2-year out for Daniel Jones. After this second year, they can get out of the contract. They still have some dead cap tied to it, especially because they restructured it a bit last year to go all in to kind of build toward after that 2022 season, but they can generally get out of it. So I think it's kind of following the same plan that he laid out. And I think Mara was probably in on that plan. We didn't see it in that scene. It was Tim, but it could be behind the scenes, him and Mara discussing this plan. And so I don't think it's any kind of surprise to anyone in this building that the Giants are 2-5 and this plan had a chance not to work when it comes to Daniel Jones. Now that's a problem maybe in its own self for some Giants fans. And that's a whole nother story, right? Like, should he have put more into this season? Should he have considered building out a different quarterback room behind Daniel Jones to give them a chance if this Jones thing didn't work this season? But I don't know if necessarily that was the plan that they had going in. It's interesting to think about from that standpoint, Nick, because it's two things conflating at once, right? They're building all these pieces to help improve the roster, trade for Brian Burns, build the O-line out, get your neighbors playmaker. At the same time, not really putting any resources into the quarterback position more than they already had, unless you include that Drew Lock.
While also understanding that that quarterback was more than likely not in your long-term plans. Now, people will say, well, they gave him that contract. It's like, well, let's look at all of the the potential decisions is probably the best way to phrase it. The potential decisions that Joe Schoen wanted to make. He wanted Drake May in this draft or Jane Daniels. The Giants wanted a quarterback, but they played themselves out of it at the latter half of the 2023 season. And in doing so, they had to settle on Malik Neighbors. Now, I wouldn't say settle because I think Malik Neighbors could be top 5 at his position, but when you're looking to change the face of your franchise, that's a completely different conversation. Joe Schoen knew that much. So they went into this season with the understanding that, hey, we are looking to upgrade if there's an upgrade available. There was not an upgrade available. So let's round out our roster and create a very firm foundation for whoever the quarterback is. And for Brian Burns, it's like, oh, that's an all in this season. It's like, dude, Brian Burns is a 26-year-old pass rusher. Right. And you're getting him on a contract that in 3 years is going to look excellent because there's going to be plenty of other edge rushers who are going to be getting paid a lot of money over the next 3 seasons. And Brian Burns has, I would say, elite upside. I don't think he's an elite player, but I think he's a very good football player and arguably the best edge rusher the Giants have had since JPP at this point. So you want to add that if you can get it at a cost-effective rate. You want to add that at value. And that's exactly what Brian Burns was when he was on the open market. Let's not forget, man, the Rams offered Carolina 2 first-round picks the season prior for Brian Burns, and they denied it. They denied that. That's actually real. And the Giants were able to get him for a second-round pick and then give him that contract. So we're talking about that type of player with that type of reputation around the National Football League. So I don't view that as just a win now type of move. That is also looking into the future, 5 years at this point.
Yeah, and he's been top 4. He's the 4th best edge rusher in fastest to pressure in the NFL right now. He's come on tape. It's obvious if you watch him. This is all playing through an injury, so I feel like that was a good decision for the future of the Giants. I also think there's like 2 sides of this. Like, you could look at it like, oh, they were making all-in moves and then they didn't care about the quarterback position. Or you could look at it like, no matter what, you weren't going to be able to put out a product like last year when it comes to the offensive line. Like, you need to have a playable offensive line. They did not have that last year. So first and foremost, they needed to figure out this offseason and they knew they were going to have to use extra resources in free agency to do it, but they need to figure out how to get a playable, passable offensive line first and foremost. The Burns thing is a good point by you. It's not just for now, it's for the future. And look, Nick, I can sit here and say they didn't take the quarterback room seriously, and it's obvious on paper. I mean, every single analyst outside the Giants organization, bubble, I should call it, Nick, said that this is one of the most pathetic quarterback rooms to ever enter a season with Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and Tommy DeVito. Fans were angry about that. Can you believe they're saying that? How could they think that about our guys? Like, it's unbelievable. But it's borne out and it's proven to be true. Like, it's not like these people are just making up crazy shit. Like, it was a horrific quarterback room to enter a season with. But at the same time, Nick, it's like, I have said throughout my time here that you don't, when it comes to building out a roster, Nick, if you're not first, you're last, and it's not that extreme. It's not like you are the best team or the worst team, but it is, and it goes to the point I'm trying to make is, I can't get too mad at him for not trying to like build out a great QB2, trying to add a great QB2, because like a great QB2 would have helped them be competitive this year, Nick, and it might have helped them get to 9 or 10 wins versus Jones, who might get them to 6 or 7 if he plays a full season. And I do honestly believe that. And I stand by that. Somebody like Flacco or Tyrod, I think, could win 3 to 4 more games over the course of a season than a quarterback like Jones. I don't care if people don't like that. You just got to watch Jones more and then watch these other guys, and then try to compute in your head what it would look like on this team. But ultimately, Nick, that's not a ceiling, right? Like that, like getting to that 9-10 win point. I know for us, it's been a ceiling as Giants fans. Like, it's like we just want to win 9 or 10 games and get to the playoffs and maybe win a playoff game, because we don't even do that often. We're usually this terrible team that's unwatchable. But it's not a real ceiling that as a GM, I think you have to go for. I think as a GM, you could be looking at it like, it's our last year with Jones. There's no point to really go for QB2. Let's just ride this crap out, and then we'll get a new QB next year.
I think they viewed Locke as a quarterback too. Though.
Yeah, I guess.
And they got him at $5 million. That's not that bad. Now, it's not as cheap as Russell Wilson in that situation, but I think Drew Lock was the perfect guy that you could bring into this locker room that wasn't going to threaten Daniel Jones' job once he came back injured. And if he had a setback in his injury, he's competent enough not to just fall flat on his face. Now, I was at training camp practice, watched a lot of Drew Lock at training camp. Drew Lock never seemed comfortable in Brian Daboll's scheme. And he dealt with some injuries through training camp, and he got hurt in that Jets preseason game, but it did not seem like he had a mastery of where to go with the football, especially after that first read wasn't there. There was a lot of in training camp where everything is very scripted. There was a lot of Drew Lock running. All the fans who went to the training camp practices, whenever second team came in there and Drew Lock was there, you saw Drew Lock running for his life. That's not how training camp is supposed to work.
Right.
Like, you're not getting hit at all. You're supposed to find solutions through your arm, through the structure of the play against the defensive play call that the defensive coordinator is throwing at you based on that offensive play. It's worked together by the offense. So you should find a solution to be there, but there was never really a solution for Drew Lock. It didn't seem like, so there was not a comfortability there, but that's kind of separate from the point that we're making here. I do think they view Lock as a cheap option insurance policy for Jones, but everything was under the assumption that this was going to be Jones's season if Jones was healthy. And I think it is a sink or swim season. His contract suggests it was a sink or swim season. And I think people in the Giants building believed in Daniel Jones enough, even though they knew he wasn't necessarily going to be the future. They believed in him enough to give him one last shot. And a lot of that, I think, does come down to just the contract that they gave him the season previous, when they believed maybe he was a little bit more than that. And we saw what happened during the 2023. So it's like they're weaning themselves off of the mistake that they made after the 2022 season. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think the point you brought up about Locke is really important and interesting, because I think from an outside perspective, fans can sometimes be like, you could just put in the next guy and see what happens, right? Like, because that's been a lot of discussion. Like, what's the worst that can happen if we play Locke? It's not like Jones is doing anything good on the field, but it's important to note that it's not that simple. And you brought up a great point. You have to understand the system, and he doesn't have a lot of time in the system, Drew Lock, and he doesn't have a lot of reps in the system. And if what you said is true, and it is because you were at camp, Nick, he was behind in the system. He wasn't finding solutions. It wasn't clear to him. And I think it goes back to something Joe Schoen said in Hard Knocks, right? He said, or maybe it was Brian Daboll, I think, in this conversation with Joe Schoen. He said, best case scenario for us is just we bring back the same quarterback room, because they know what's going on in our system. Tyrod Taylor knows how to run this system, right? With that said, it almost makes sense that, like, because then I wonder, Nick, because it's like, okay, now I know why they can't play Lock, right? He honestly, like, he can't figure this out fast. Like, he doesn't know the system. And because you ask yourself, you look at some of these things, because you said, like, I believe they viewed Drew Lock as a QB2, and it's hard for me to come to terms with that. And at the same time, that being true, while at the same time, them seeing the tape that Jones is putting out. In 3 of 7 games this year, Jones has been unplayable. Minnesota, Cincinnati, and last week against the Eagles, unplayable level of quarterback play. Just, you can't even do anything. You can't move the ball beyond the sticks. Like, that to me is like, okay, well, then you would obviously play the QB2 that you certainly believed in. But I think the reality is this QB2 doesn't have a lot of time in the system, which leads me to believe it's like, okay, well, then is it going to be DeVito or Lott? When they finally do make the decision to move on from Jones, which is coming soon, is it going to be DeVito or Lott? Because DeVito can run the system at least.
I think it's Locke. This is like, I'm talking about months ago. You're expecting to see a lot of struggles during training camp, but but it did seem like it was more struggles than I was ready for. Now he was dealing with a bad offensive line, right? But this is a veteran quarterback. Drew Lock's been around for a little bit. He's a professional. He's been on multiple teams, multiple stops. He was in Seattle. He was in Denver. He's matured a lot since his rookie season. So I just expected him to be a little bit more comfortable within these base plays that were being run early on in training camp. And he wasn't. Now, that doesn't mean he's not comfortable now. I think we're going to find out sooner or later. And I think it should happen after Pittsburgh. You're basically sacrificing Daniel Jones to the TJ Watts and the Cam Haywards and the Alex
crazy
Highsmith.
With the injury guarantee that this is the plan. But
I know. And I don't love it from that perspective.
Yeah.
I also try to view it from the team's perspective. It's like, dude, do we really want to throw Drew Lock in there? Because Drew Lock might have to be, I don't know if they're delusional enough to think like savior. If they're 2-6, like it's like the season is lost at that point. You're just kind of want to put somebody out there who can keep the offense respectable, score points, keep the team competitive, and keep the locker room from deteriorating and falling apart. I think a lot of like the appeal of Daniel Jones is all of those I think I said this earlier this week, all the intangibles, man. He's the exact guy you want in your quarterback room from the perspective of being a leader and setting an example for the rest of your team. And I think fans don't value that as highly as NFL teams do. And people
anymore, at least they did it at the beginning. It's
been
a long time of that. It's been a long time of that as the selling point for your quarterback.
That should never, like, if that's the selling point of the quarterback, I think you have an issue, right? You need it.
We've always said it's the foundation. You need it to have any chance to get an elite quarterback, but it can't only, it's just a foundation.
That's the foundation. That's the best way to put it. It's only the foundation. And if you're sitting there making excuses, well, he's the first guy in, last guy out, typically he sucks on the field. And that's why you're making those excuses. And I'm not attempting to do that at this moment, but I am trying to find a way to rationalize or justify why they have bought into him after the 2022 season, other than the contract, which is the real reason why. If that contract wasn't there, I think the Giants would have probably went in another direction.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, look, when it comes to that, I just generally speaking, think this was always kind of the plan. They were going to let it ride out with Jones, like you said, not provide much competition at QB2, though somebody they sort of believe in, I guess, in Locke, but obviously not Tyrod to that level.
But again, the Locke thing was because of the injury. They thought Locke might start like 3 games. That was a conversation we were having not long ago,
right?
You know?
Right. If Jones didn't come back from the injury, and he came back fast from the injury. So I think that's kind of been the plan. And I don't think Mara's going to change. Nothing that's happened so far would change Mara's mind in that regard. Like, and then as far as Daboll goes, my thoughts are pretty much, I think we're on the same page with this, which is, as long as he doesn't have a Joe Judge presser at some point, right? Or the team doesn't quit on him like 2017 quit on McAdoo, or whoever was McAdoo the coach at that point. It's been so many guys. Yeah. God, McAdoo, Shermer. It's crazy.
Shermer came in 2018.
Yeah,
and then he had
so I'm talking about
2019.
17. So that McAdoo end of season collapse was just, a lot of things that had to happen in the locker room. And so
there was a confluence of things too. And then the Eli Manning decision was factored into that. And I think John Mara was culpable for that, because there's no way, in my opinion, that Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese conspired to bench Eli Manning without consulting John Mara. I think John Mara signed off on that because, look, man, for better or worse, Ben McAdoo, look, I was not a fan of Ben McAdoo, but Ben McAdoo saw something in Geno Smith and wanted Geno Smith to run his system. And I can't sit here and say that he was wrong, but from optics standpoint, benching somebody who was setting records for his longevity in the league and being an Iron Man, it looked
a season that was already lost.
Yeah. And a lost season in Oakland, was it at the time? It wasn't Vegas yet, so it was in Oakland. Oh God, man, such bad optics.
The issue with that was always just the season was already lost, and you're not going to gain enough information from Geno in those starts to be like, we can use him as our starter moving forward.
You might be able to, though. Like, I think that was such a, and I'm not saying what they did. Like, I can steel man why they did that. And I think you could gain enough information if you started him. But moving on from a legend who's won 2 Super Bowls, who was present when your father was alive, from John Mara's perspective, in this franchise, there's so many emotions and there's so much that goes into that decision. And the way it played out was just not great, especially with what was happening on the Giants franchise, at that time.
Like Eli was crying in the locker room, which was crazy. You have the best player in your franchise's history, the most impactful to me. I know Lawrence Taylor is actually the best player, but he's not a quarterback. So you're never, to me, going to be the best player unless you're a quarterback. So you got the best player in your franchise's history, like literally crying because of this. Like, and that's insane to even think about.
It is, but think about it from Ben McAdoo's perspective for a second. If he thought Eli was cooked at that time, and he knows that he doesn't have that much time,
Right.
and he believes that he can have a lot more success with this younger quarterback, it
He
makes sense.
Yeah.
He could save his job. The offense can run more efficiently. It's getting away from an older quarterback. Like there's a lot that went into that.
But for him to think that like Geno Smith, without getting any reps all season, just sitting on a bench for 2.5 months, and because you don't get reps as the backup, this is the thing people don't realize. Like there's nothing to do for you once the season starts as a backup. You're just sitting there, kind of watching and doing mental reps for the most part. So to think that he was just going to come in like that, like just actually be able to run this offense with no rapport is just that's something I don't think McAdoo factored in. But he was probably desperate, like you said, which is interesting. He was desperate to keep a job.
I mean, he had already gone through a hair change at that point, bro. He had a lot going on.
He fixed the side. He found a suit that fits him. But I think so. For me, just to circle it back, and then I want to get to. We didn't even get to what I thought was the main takeaway. What Mara said. I'm gonna get to in a second. But I will say for me, and you can tell me if this is different for you at all. From what I gathered, Shane's hot seat is a lot less hot than Brian Daboll's, because Brian Daboll, yes, he got the vote of confidence yesterday, but that could change so fast with a bad presser, or if the team, collapses on him and the locker room collapses. Do you feel the same way?
100%. Yeah. And I think coaches are typically going to be a little bit more expendable in these situations. They're the ones who have to manage the team. Dude, let's just call a spade at this point, Dan. Deontay Banks quit on the defense in the fourth quarter against the Eagles. It's not a great sign. Malik Neighbors looked checked out, looked done. I'm not saying he quit, but he looked done after the game when he was getting asked about why he didn't have any second half catches. He was like, I was open, check the tape. And then Daboll got put on the spot, and Daboll's like, yeah, he was open. Like what is Daboll going to say? Like, he's put between a rock and a hard place at this point, man. So like, it's not. Tensions are high. The only thing that can alleviate those tensions is winning. And you're heading into Pittsburgh against that defense with Daniel Jones as your quarterback and Josh Azudu as your left tackle. Not a great situation.
No. And it's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting to me because, like, I know a lot has been said about Mara, and it can be said about Mara, and some of it's true, whatever. He can take the blame. You can put blame on him and subscribe it to the fact that we've gotten to this point and say, part of this is on Mara. Some people think a lot of it or all of it is on Mara. But I know for a fact that this guy wants to win, just like he wants to be a winner. So the fact that he has to go out and do these pressers like seemingly every year around this time of the year, late October at 2-5 or at 2-6, and just be, it must really eat on him to have to do this shit every single year. But that's where I thought the biggest takeaway from his presser was for the first time ever during these, he didn't give the vote of confidence for Daniel Jones. He gave it for those two players. Now, he did say, I'm not going to talk about any players, even though he was asked specifically about Jones. But anyone who's watched these before has seen that he's gone out of his way to really defend Jones. I mean, just a couple months ago, he said, I don't regret giving him that contract at all. Like, heading into this year, after what he put on tape in 2023 and just the whole, everything that he's done over 5 years, if you look at the whole thing, not just the 2022 block, which wasn't even that good because we didn't throw the ball at all. He's like, nope, I don't regret that contract at all. And to this point where like we finally gotten to the point with him where it's like, all right, no comment at all. I don't even want to talk about this. To me, that says something. I know some people think I'm reading too much into this, but to me, he's done it at every step of the way. And now I think it's finally like, all right, it's over. It's finally, it's the first sign, I think, of things being over.
The proof is in the pudding, too.
Yeah.
I mean, 7 points against Cincinnati, second worst EPA heading into that game defensively. And then 3 points against the Philadelphia Eagles. You have 10 points in these one primetime game and then one that return to Saquon Barkley.
Both to define your season at 2-3, right? Like if you win both games, you're 4-3, not 2-5.
That's not even including the other primetime game, the Thursday game against Dallas, where the Giants had several opportunities to create explosive plays and the quarterback could not connect on them. So there's a lot. There's a lot of instances now that John Mara can look at and be like, look, we've added resources to help you, and you're still not getting it done after I publicly advocated for you multiple times. Like, how much egg can I get on my face? Right. So he knows at this point, and this is another reason why the contract is structured the way it's structured, and the Giants can get out of this relatively unscathed. There will be dead cap, but the grand scheme of things, it's not like a Todd Gurley level dead cap. who never played a down on that contract, which is still just crazy. And it completely changed how the entire league viewed running backs, which is funny.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting.
The pendulum might be swinging back the other way with Saquon and
Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry. Yeah,
Derrick Henry's so freaking good.
He's so good.
I don't even care what anybody says. Derrick Henry's like, I think, one of the best running backs of all time. I really do believe that, given what he's been able to accomplish in this era of running back play. When I watch, I mean, he's done it twice this season, but the 80-yard run he had this past week on primetime, the Monday night game we watched, the Island, we always watch Island games. Nick and I love that we get to watch those. The fact that he can do that at 250 pounds and at 30 years old is unbelievable. It's just truly like remarkable from an athletic standpoint. And I stand by that. I think he's one of the best athletes to ever play football, Derrick Henry. I really do believe that, to be 250 and to have that kind of speed, especially as you get older. And it's not just like older for him, Nick. It's like he's also like taken thousands of carries and thousands of hits. Yeah. It's like he also has that going for him. It's not just that like he's older, but he was like Dobbins, where he got like injured a bunch of times. Dobbins not even that old, by the way.
No, but yeah, he's hardly old. What is he, like 24, 25? Because he was 20 when he came in the league.
I got him for free in our dynasty league. I was super excited about it.
Did you?
Last year? Yeah, he's been super
man.
In the one you created. We have 2 dynasty leagues, Nick and I. But yeah, so I think that was my biggest takeaway. Just like the no vote of confidence for Jones was something that was different. We've seen him, go out of his way to give these votes of confidence to this quarterback, to the fan base for a while now. So we'll see what happens, man. It's going to be an interesting rest of the year. It's going to be another interesting offseason for this team. It's like this team gives you like the fun content during the offseason. It's been this way for so long, Nick. Like you have to go through pain of what was supposed to be fun, watching your team play football, and then you just get intrigue in the off season.
Yeah, no, it's going to turn around though. It's going to turn around eventually. So, and it just seems like it's taken forever, but it's been a long 6 years. We've been doing this podcast for, I think, all 6 of them. I think this is our 6th season together. 2019 is when we started. So, we're waiting patiently.
We've only done this podcast through the Daniel Jones era. Can you believe that?
Our first, and I've said this before, but the first podcast we did together to review a game was
Tampa,
week 3, 2019, Tampa Bay.
It's gone so downhill since then.
But it was such a fire podcast though, because we're like, yo, Danny Dimes. I didn't expect
a fire podcast, dude. I look, obviously, we can go over this real quick, but you guys know, Nick and I both did not have high grades on Daniel Jones. I had a 2nd round grade, mid-second, and I think you had a 2nd round grade as well.
I did.
But I will be fully transparent. You can go back and listen to that podcast, and it will probably confirm and prove this. I was all in on Daniel Jones after that Tampa game. I'm like, holy shit, the Giants found something that nobody saw in the NFL. Like, they scouted this. They figured it out. Like, this kid can do everything. He's rolling to his left, making throws downfield. Like, he's running when he needs to. He's big. He's got all the tools. Like, they just needed to figure him out and get him in the right system. I totally bought into the Kool-Aid because I wanted to, man. I just wanted to be that way. I wanted to feel that way about the Giants. I wanted to feel like, oh my God, we might have hit on an elite quarterback, because your life as a fan changes so much when you hit that quarterback. It's everything. People can talk all they want about, you got to build the team. It's more important to build the team. Trust me, everything will change. Everything will feel different if they actually get the quarterback. Everything. You think the Strouds and the Burrows and now like the Mays, and they need to build their team around these players, but they also, and Daniels, but they also have had so many changes. Like, Washington is a winning team this year.
I know. And our age group never really knew the Giants without a quarterback.
Right.
Like, our age group, we had Eli. Like,
right.
When we started really getting into football and learning even like, modest and rudimentary X's and O's, Eli Manning was the quarterback. So like I remember the Kerry Collins years, but before that, I really don't remember like Dave Brown. Like, I don't know if you do.
I do not remember the Dave Brown era.
Yeah. So like we didn't get the experience. Our older listeners though, they did. So they kind of know like what this transition period is, post somebody like Phil Simms, post Eli Manning, but we had 6 years of this post Eli Manning and it's been nothing but mediocre.
Yeah, no, it's been mostly misery. Mediocre is probably not a fair way to determine what we've had the last 6 years.
Yeah, I'm trying
It
to be
is.
nice.
No, I think it's important to say though, because I think that's where a lot of the disconnect happens with the fan base, right? Like
Sure.
people get mad and I think honestly, rightfully so, when people term this as okay, or this has been passable, or this has been middling or mediocre. Like there's still hope within this. It's not fair to term it as that. It's been 5 horrific years where they've been 2-6 or worse with Jones, and then one good year that in reality was only pretty good. It wasn't Chiefs level good or like fun, really
Yeah.
fun. It even wasn't even like
No.
what the Lions gave their fans last
Of
year, right?
course, of course, of course
Yeah,
not.
I know you know that.
No,
I'm
no,
not saying
I know you know that. I know that. No,
yes.
but in all seriousness, like the Giants, look, they won a playoff game in 2022. That's all well and good, but nobody was picking the Giants to do anything in the playoffs, right? They were the
Right,
fun, cute team that won a playoff game. That's like, oh, nobody picked that before the
right.
season. This is a cool story. His first year of a regime. Like that's the peak of the Giants over the last decade, is being that cute little team that won that one playoff game. They never threatened anybody. And then the next season, the next time they had an opportunity to play after getting destroyed in the divisional round by the Eagles, they lost 40-0 at home to the Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
Like, that's bad, man. That is not good.
Yeah, it's exactly then that's the reality. And it's all about perspective, right? Like it's different. Like the reason that season felt fun, and it was fun.
It
2022
was.
was fun. I am not saying it's not, but part of it is expectations and perspective, right? Because going into the year, the Giants were picked to be last, and they ended up winning a playoff game and winning 9 games in the regular season. The perspective side of it is the Dallas Cowboys. You're a Cowboys fan. If the Cowboys win one game in the playoffs this year, it's a disappointment to those fans, right? Because they've passed the point of like being expected to be last, being predicted last, and like having a surprise year. That's what makes it fun, the expectations and the ability to beat expectations. Just not something the Giants have been able to do for the most part since we started this, Nick. But fans have told me that have lived through it that this era has reminded them a lot of the Dave Brown era, the Daniel Jones era. Obviously, it's sad for it's just sad for him, I guess, that like they both went to Duke. There's that Duke comparison, and now it brings the helmet scouters back into the mix and gives them some life.
Brown's a Jersey guy, I think, too. I think he was born. Wasn't he born in Jersey?
He was born in Jersey. Yeah.
Yeah.
They took him in the supplemental draft too. I found that so interesting. The first round supplemental draft, but it was different to the point where Brown's last 2 years, he rode the bench with the Giants. They didn't keep trying to trot him out as the starter and like make it work with him. So it was a little bit different, the Brown era, but it was still an era of no hope at the quarterback position. Hopefully the Giants can figure this thing out fast, Nick. We'll see what happens, man. I haven't looked at this class much, but I find it very hard to believe I'm going to find someone I have anywhere near the level of conviction I had on Drake May and Caleb Williams. We'll see.
Yeah, it's difficult too. But like,
Yeah.
I have no eyes on these guys other than watching them on Saturday, so I try not to make that like put that seed in my mind quite yet.
Yeah.
I might like turn on one of these films. It's difficult with quarterback because quarterbacks are always under a microscope, right? So like, a lot of people on Twitter will always hyper focus on them. So it's one doesn't really slip underneath the radar. Whereas other positions, I'll dive into the tape and I'm like, no one's talking about this guy. No one's talking. And then like February or March rolls around and I start hearing like one person who like has a huge draft following be like, that guy's good. And I'm like, oh shit. Like I noticed that. Yeah. Sweet. Cool.
There's also
that doesn't really happen with the quarterback.
No, there's not. It doesn't. And I also think for me, the problem always comes down to like, the tape is very important, the college tape for a quarterback, but the game is so different that that it's hard for me. I can watch Michael Penix dominate Washington tape with Caleb DeBoer and be like, is that definitely going to translate to an NFL game? Or I could watch Drake May like seeing things on a field that I'm surprised he sees, throwing with random spurts of anticipation, making plays with horrible pocket, like arm talent, size, like things that I can project. That's what is like where I want to work with that. Like so for me, a lot of it is eye test when it comes to these quarterbacks, because you have to project. And I'm struggling to see if I'll find any prospect like Caleb or like May, but I hope I will. And even Jaden, who was that next tier for me. And a lot of the reasons we didn't like Jaden were unrelated to what we thought he could be as a quarterback. It was related to the size factor. Can he hold up at the NFL level? And then some of the things that he's been able to correct, right? Like at college, when he scrambled a lot, Jaden, he didn't keep his eyes downfield. He looked to run. He's been able to correct that, right? He's done a much better job at the NFL level. Utilizing the middle of the field, he's been a little bit better at that. Like things that we were a little worried about, but a lot of it came down to his size.
Dude, I think Cliff is designing a good offense for him too.
I know,
which is weird, dude. But Cliff has like at least
I have to give Cliff his credit.
He deserves his credit, man. That's a great offense for a young rookie, and they're able to run the football, and they're making the most of what on paper looks like a suboptimal offensive line. And they're actually like putting like Terry McLaurin, he doesn't align in the slot all that often.
Crazy that Bobby Johnson is turning this offensive line into a good offensive line with no talent. Like, what is that?
I think it's the Jaden Daniel effect, and it's just playing complementary football just on offense, right? Like complementary football is usually a term used for good special teams, good defense, and good offense. But complementary football could be associated with just one side of the football, right? Your offensive line is blocking well. You all know the mission. The wide receivers are running the right routes. The play caller is maximizing his quarterback. All that's happening for Washington's offense at the moment.
Yeah, it's just such a weird sport, man. I watched for Beyond the Box Score. I had to watch a bunch of Drake May Mariota tape from 2 years ago, and my God, Mariota was one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen on film. It felt like in that during those Atlanta games, in the small sample size, I watched him play the Steelers one game and one other game. The Steelers was a home game, and then like Jaden gets hurt. Mariota comes in. He throws for like 212, runs for 30 yards, moves the offense the entire game with an offensive line that on paper is supposed to be bad. It's just so odd, really, seeing how the NFL works with that. It's confidence plays a factor, like you said, people playing together. I think one of the big factors with quarterback, why me and you are such believers in this position, making such a difference, is because we believe a great quarterback invigorates the entire roster, has them believing in each other, believing in the system, believing in what the coach is preaching. Like, oh my God, we can win. We can do this thing. We have a Jaden Daniels. We have a CJ Stroud. We have a Joe Burrow versus kind of like we have a X. And he,
And this is the most simple thing to understand, and we'll get out of here right after this. Yeah. The most simple thing to understand, anybody who's ever played a damn sport in their fucking life, Dan, anybody who has played a sport in their life relates to this, because when they're playing that sport and they have that one player on their team, if they are not that player who is so damn good, you all look to that player to score, right? Like, oh, let's try to get him the open shot in hockey. Let's try to set him up. Oh, we got to get the basketball. We all understand that innately as competitors. Now just extrapolate that in the most high pressure, most lucrative situation there is, which is football, really, or any sort of professional sport. And now that's the quarterback position. That is the most highest of pressures. So yeah, we all get that.
Quarterback is like equating it to basketball, because that's the only one that I've really played extensively, and it's been a lot of like leagues and pickups. Like I'm not a great player or anything, never have been, but I've been good enough to play in
elite defense.
Yeah. And I can make open jumpers from like 15 feet in, and then I have a range break. But it's just the idea that like the quarterback is at the same time he's playing two positions. He's the point guard and the best scorer. He has to make the throws to score, but he also is the point guard that has to keep the offense in time and on rhythm and on pace. So he's just doing so many roles at once.
He's the engine.
Everything.
He's everything.
It's really everything.
And the more efficient your engine, the better the car. The more efficient your quarterback, the better the offense. And also, the quarterback can act as a coach, which we've seen Peyton Manning and Tom Brady be. So the more roles that they can execute, the higher value they are, and the better the team is, and the more respect they command around the locker room. And then there's the personal aspect of playing quarterback, where it's like, yeah, that's our leader. But if he's like a douche or like doesn't have any personality, he could be good and people can rally around his skills and his traits on the football field, but they may not like fully love him or fully invest in. That can also affect the locker room too. So there's just so much that goes into playing that position.
Yeah, and then the vice versa also applies too. Like if that engine is faulty, or if it's not, it drags your whole team down. So it is what it is in that front. But yeah, we'll move forward. We're going to talk about Steelers Giants a little bit here shortly after. And we're going to bring on now Alex Kozora.
What's up, everybody? It's Jerry Ferrara. I've got a new podcast called Throwbacks with Heisman Trophy winner Matt Leinart, where we will be talking about all things sports, all things pop culture, and all things about our lives. From football locker rooms to Hollywood green rooms, we've got you covered. We're your weekly destination for the games you want to hear about and the stories you won't forget. Listen to Throwbacks on Apple Podcasts or Spotify with new episodes every Thursday.
What's up, big Blue Banter listeners? I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. And all of Mint Mobile's plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/BBB. That's mintmobile.com/BBB. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/BBB. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leader in men's lifestyle and grooming. Every man knows the unbeatable feeling of a fresh barbershop shave. Now, what if I told you that you no longer have to wait weeks or even months between appointments to experience it? Introducing Manscaped's newest innovation, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver, the game-changing tool that brings the luxury of professional shave right into your home. Whether you're after that daily silky smooth finish or prefer to maintain a rugged 5 o'clock shadow, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver is your go-to for precision and style every time. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code BIGBLUE for 20% off. Gentlemen, this has changed the grooming game for me, and I highly recommend it for you. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. Hey, Giants fans, we've teamed up with Buck Foston to give away exclusive free apparel from hats to premium sweatshirts and hoodies. It's easy to enter. Just follow them on Instagram @_Buck Foston or sign up for the newsletter at buckfoston.com. Next, DM them our 20% discount code BLUE20 on Instagram or through their website's chatbot, and you're entered in the giveaway drawing. You can participate every week and boost your chances by tagging friends and liking posts. 3 winners are picked at random each week. It's simple, free, and a great way to score apparel from Buck Foston. You must reside in the United States to enter. Terms and conditions apply. Look, we all wear underwear every single day, and we all have complaints. They ride up, they're not comfortable, they don't fit correctly. I shared these complaints until I started wearing Skims. When I tried Skims stretch boxer briefs, I felt like I finally found that missing link. They gave me all the movement I needed for the workout. They were comfortable while I was sitting here podcasting and watching all of this New York Giants film. Everything from the texture to the fit worked for me, and it will work for you too. It is a great product, and I highly recommend it. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows. All right, everybody, here to help Dan and I preview the New York Giants Monday Night Football matchup against Pittsburgh Steelers is Alex Kozora of SteelersDepot.com. Alex and I met, I think it was 2017. We were down at the Senior Bowl. It was my first year down there. And we talked about the Steelers and the Giants. And, you know, the Giants are still, unfortunately, not that great of a football team. The Steelers, exciting, great defense. Alex, how you doing? And what else do you have to promote, my friend?
The more things change, the more they stay the same, it feels like. Guys, thanks for having me on. Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. So cover the Steelers wire to wire. And a little bit better of a season, I think, than you guys are having. But, hey, it's the Steelers. And if there's anything to do about Steeler fans, it's always going to be a tight game. Always going to be close. Never know what can happen. So no assumptions for this one.
I want to start, Alex, by talking a little bit about the quarterback position. Giants and Steelers were in a different, phase of at least of their approach at quarterback this offseason. The Steelers, I thought, probably showed the NFL a really creative way to potentially upgrade the quarterback situation, something that is one of the hardest things to do in this sport, or is the hardest thing to do in this sport, find an upgrade at quarterback, besides maybe finding a swing offensive tackle. But they traded for Justin Fields, gave up not much draft capital, and they signed Russell Wilson for $1.5 million against the cap. And so far to this point, both have put together winning games. Russell won his first start, and Justin Fields was 4-2. As it stands right now, do you think that Russell Wilson is the starter moving forward, or is this kind of similar to the Justin Fields situation where it will be dependent on his play?
Yeah, Mike Tomlin has been careful to not commit. He's even technically not committed to a starter for this Giants game, although we all know it's going to be Russell Wilson. And I think as long as that Wilson can continue to do the things he showed a lot of flashes of against the Jets, which is just produce, get this offense to put up more than their typical 20 points per game, get explosive plays, he'll take care of the football, he'll be the guy. So I think some of the general consensus is this is still a little bit of a trial run, and there's the bye week next week that they'll kind of use to evaluate. And so Tomlin's whole reason to going to Wilson, going back to him, because he was the week 1 starter before getting hurt before the Falcons game, was let's just see what we have in him. And so it's been a little bit of a fact-finding mission, but I think as long as Wilson continues to play relatively steady, he's going to be the guy. But yeah, it's interesting. Pittsburgh is really, it took advantage of, you, like you said, Dan, some really unique situations, getting Wilson for $1.5 million because Denver was on the hook for his contract. That situation for a starting quarterback, his resume doesn't come up too often. Trading for Fields for really pennies on the dollar because Chicago couldn't move him. And Fields was never part of their initial plan. The initial plan was supposed to be Wilson and Kenny Pickett. Once Pittsburgh signed Wilson, he was going to be the de facto starter. Pickett then wanted to trade, asked out, goes to Philadelphia. 24 hours later, the team goes out there and gets Justin Fields. So it has been a pretty unique way to build it and a pretty cheap way to build it. And so it's been a really kind of low risk way to upgrade and evaluate that quarterback room.
What did you think of the decision to move to Russell Wilson? Do you think that was just a high upside swing to see if you have a higher ceiling as an offense with this player who has won a Super Bowl in the past over a player like Justin Fields?
I'll admit I was skeptical. I would have stuck with Justin Fields. And I think, the fact that Tomlin has the best job security in football and maybe all of sports helps you make that decision. Somebody on the hot seat does not probably make that kind of risk and take that sort of chance. And so when you're Tomlin, 17 years coaching, sign an extension this offseason, you have some leeway if it does go wrong. But I think, Nick, your point is correct that Fields played well. I was impressed. I think the team has been impressed by Fields. But you still had kind of the same old Steelers of, okay, let's win the 2017 slugfest. Let's rely on our kicker, rely on our defense. And that is a formula to get you in the playoffs. That's not been Pittsburgh's issue. The issue is, can you win a playoff game with that formula when you go against a top-tier quarterback or a top-tier offense? And Jackson, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Pittsburgh has not won a playoff game since 2016. It's an unbelievably poor stat. It's their longest drought of the post-merger Steelers era. And so they got to find a way to get to that next level. And so I think it was that. I think Fields' play was waning a bit. The Raiders game, I thought, was his worst passing performance of the season. So he was kind of playing his worst ball as Wilson's getting healthy. And then flat out, Tomlin's a loyal guy. And Tomlin recruited Wilson partially away from the Giants. I know Wilson had visited the Giants before he came to Pittsburgh and then, signed with the Steelers. And so I think that conversation that Tomlin and Wilson had in March of like, hey, let's go win together. Tomlin wanted to see that thing through and see what Wilson could do. And the results one game in have been, paying off.
And as it pertains to this game, I think one thing Nick and I discussed earlier on a podcast earlier this week was we brought up Russell Wilson as an example. And I had some stats from Jacob Gibbs from True Media that showed just how differently defenses approach playing these two quarterbacks. The amount of light boxes Najee Harris faced versus in this one game versus all the games with Justin Fields, and a lot of that is just because Russell Wilson takes those shots early, and defenses have to respect that. So I have to play further off the ball, and they have to operate with more space. And I think as it pertains to this matchup, the Giants, Shane Bowen, I don't expect him to do anything too exotic in this game. He'll call blitzes early like he likes to. But ultimately speaking, I think the game plan will be so much different against Russell Wilson than it would have been for Justin Fields even. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. As far as the passing game goes with Russell Wilson, it seemed to me like it was funneled a lot through George Pickens, deep shots downfield. What are some of the things that Giants fans can look for within this passing game with Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, game plans vary with Wilson against the Jets because the Jets run a ton of man coverage. It was a lot of picks and bunches and rubs, switch releases, rub routes, slant flat combinations, those types of things. I think the Jets had a really poor game plan in this one. Their secondary was beat up, but man, they just got toasted in man coverage. Their DBs were playing on the same level. They were getting picked, and they just really struggled to pass things off well. I think it's a little bit of identifying Pickens. They will move him around. He's a lot more versatile than he was as a rookie. As a rookie, he was just like a Z receiver, go deep, run the 9 route. That's all he did. He's a more varied receiver. We can line in the slot, run a fuller route tree, better post catch. And so I think being able to identify and attack Pickens early is going to be important for the Giants. It's a lot of play action. Pittsburgh. Really, I think the biggest benefit Wilson brought was play action. He was such more effective. He sells the fake better than Fields. And with Arthur Smith, that is such under center play action, base it off the run game, marry the inside zone with their bootlegs. You got to really sell that play fake. And so it's a lot of play action. It's moving the launch point, a lot of bootlegs out in the flat for some easy conversions to tight ends with the vertical shots. And that's kind of just how they marry their pass game overall. So I would just, the Giants have to be disciplined, read their keys, and be ready for that. Probably from a pass game standpoint is where things revolve around. Because for Pittsburgh, it's run game, their base run game. play pass in terms of boots, and then play pass vertically is kind of where they build their offense from.
I want to give you an opportunity to expound on that beautiful description that you just stated. If you were the New York Giants, if you were Shane Bowen, how would you best approach removing Arthur Smith's strengths? What is your idea of stopping the Steelers offense and a successful game plan being curated by a defensive coordinator that's facing the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, I think it just starts with stopping the run. I know that is so maybe trivial, but it is so central to how Pittsburgh operates. I mean, Arthur Smith, the Steelers this year, they're second in rushing attempts and they're 32nd in pass attempts per game. And for Smith, that is achieving perfect balance in the Arthur Smith world. Like that is his MO. I mean, it has been a true Arthur Smith experience in terms of multiple tight ends and heavy play action and a really high run rate and a really low pass rate overall. So it just run blitzes early to try to get Pittsburgh off schedule. They need to be on schedule. They're still a really poor first down team overall. They're still, I think, 31st in first down yardage gain per play, which is hard to believe they won as much as they have despite that stat, because they really need to rely on getting themselves into third and short and not being in second and long. So I think, the D-line in general for the Giants, and Dexter Lawrence went up front against Pittsburgh's fourth string center, Ryan McCollum, is going to be a really big matchup to watch there. But I think just being aggressive on first downs and run blitzes that puts Pittsburgh behind the sticks, and so play action becomes less of a weapon, is probably where it has to start for the Giants.
It seems like Russell Wilson held on to the football quite a bit on those passing attempts against the Jets. I want to say on 21 of the 27 passing attempts, he held the football for more than 2.5 seconds. So is quick game something that he's just abandoning? Is that something that's not ran as frequently in Arthur Smith's system? And on top of that, does that give Pittsburgh any sort of pause? Are they scared at all? Because the Giants are the leading sack generators in the league right now, and they tend to get after it when quarterbacks want to hold on to the football.
Well, I would say that Wilson has never been a quick release kind of guy. I think that's why he didn't work in Denver with Sean Payton, because Sean Payton was all about the quick game system, Drew Brees, identify things, get the ball out quickly. I think his snap to throw times historically have been around 2.8, 2.9 seconds. And so he's been the most sacked quarterback since he's come into the league. And so I think last week was a little bit about, because they ran so many vertical concepts, you were holding on the ball a little bit longer, you are waiting for routes to develop. And so that may be one reason. And I think Pittsburgh, although their passing game was effective, it really wasn't crisp. There really was no fluidity. It was a lot of 50-50 balls. Let's get chunk plays at 30-plus yards, and that's how we kind of move the offense. And so, yeah, I think there's a concern there, because I don't expect this game to come out to be, in terms of the quick game and the three-step drop and all those kinds of things. You'll see less RPOs with Russell Wilson than you had with Justin Fields. So, yeah, it's never been really Wilson's style. I mean, I think he's a smart quarterback. I think he reads things pre-snap better than Fields, but he's not a super high-level, cerebral, anticipatory thrower where he's throwing guys open. It's kind of more throwing the guy open whenever he gets open, or trying to fit the ball in a way that lets the guy go up there and make a play, a la George Pickens, who's as good on contested catches as any receiver, I think, in football. So, yeah, that is going to be a concern. And again, I think you talk about handling Dexter Lawrence, and you've got to put probably, double team him, even in pass pro. And then what does it do with Brian Burns? Does that leave him one-on-one against, offensive tackle? So, that's probably the concern there, is just handling Lawrence and the effects of how that attention drawn to him may, create situations for other Giants players.
One thing that's been clear throughout Arthur Smith's tenure as a coach is, despite not always having the most talent to work with, and I will ask you about some of the new guys the Steelers have added to this offensive line, he's developed really, really, really effective run games. His run game in Atlanta was phenomenal, at times the best in the NFL from a schematic standpoint. The Giants have struggled at times dealing with some power gap concepts this year. Last week, essentially, they shut down the pass early and still gave up 28 points because eventually the run got to them. What are some of the concepts the Steelers like to run in the run game, and some things the Giants can look out for there?
It's a pretty varied run game. The offensive line coach, and in Pittsburgh, it may have switched a little bit under Smith, but the O-line coach has kind of been the de facto run game coordinator. Well, the OC is kind of really controlling the pass game. And so under the O-line coach, Pat Meyer, they've really run everything. But Arthur Smith is known as a zone guy, inside zone, outside zone. That's going to be his bread and butter. But they've really run everything. A little bit of gap. They got their biggest run against the Jets on a gap scheme. The right guard, backside guard, pulling for 34 yards by Najee Harris. They run a lot against the Jets. It's a little situational, but I think against more of those even front teams like New York, I think is a crunch, where those double wham blocks, where they're trying to ear hold a three tech and have this kind of quick hitting play of field. They ran that probably half dozen times against the Jets, and it had mixed results overall. So crunch, inside zone. They've been running a lot of crack toss this year. The results have been pretty mixed, but they're trying. So I would say inside zone primarily, and then just inside zone duo, gap, crunch, crack toss are kind of their most frequent run schemes.
Speaking of the rushing attack, Alex, so Najee Harris is I don't know, bell cow is the right way to term it, but your big physical back that tends to fit what Arthur Smith wants to do. But we know he has an affinity for Cordero Patterson, who I don't know if he'll be healthy for this game, but I think he's coming back soon. And then Jaylen Warren returned from injury a few weeks ago. So I just wanted to ask you, what do you think this how do you think this rushing approach opportunities, how do you think that's going to necessarily manifest? And do you think Jaylen Warren will have a bigger role, or is that game script dependent?
It's been a little tough to judge because the backfield in totality has not really been healthy this year. Jaylen Warren came into the year with a hamstring injury, and then he went down with a knee injury week 3. Cordero Patterson hurt his ankle week 4. You're right. Patterson has, I think, a good chance to return for the Giants game. Not been confirmed yet, but I like his odds in this one. So this might be really the first time all season that all 3 guys have really been truly healthy and available to really see how that rotation goes, because Arthur Smith does love himself a really good running back by committee, to the frustration, I'm sure, of some fantasy owners out there. Harris primarily is your early down back, first down, second down. Warren's going to mix in. We'll see how Patterson fits as well. Warren's going to be your third down back. He's going to be your pass protector, your receiver. He is as good in pass protection as anyone, I think, in football, any running back in football. I mean, he is just, a chip on his shoulder kind of guy. He's squatty, but he's strong. And he's just kind of got that, I call him a fire hydrant or a bowling ball with legs. Like, this guy just is that kind of runner and attacks things in pass pros. So he's going to be your third down back. Harris is going to work first and second down, and Patterson may mix in all situations. Got a little bit of third down work early in the season, more receiver than pass protector, given his wide receiver background coming out of Tennessee. So again, it's a little hard for us to tell because they just haven't been healthy enough to evaluate, but there's going to be roles for all guys. Harris on early downs, Warren more pass downs, Patterson kind of catch all.
I want to flip it to the other side of the ball and talk a little bit about that matchup, which is going to be a scary one, to be quite frank, for Giants fans. So Steelers have 2 of my favorite players. TJ Watt, I was a Wisconsin Badger. So TJ Watt and Nick Herbig. Herbig was just a player whose film was phenomenal at college, and no one knew where he was going to play in the pros. What's his position? We can't draft him. Same thing happened with Leo Chenal. 2 guys who were criminally underdrafted, amazing value picks. It's just borne out by the truth and by the tape. Is Herbig going to play? It's true. Is Herbig going to play in this game, Alex?
That's a great Wisconsin Badgers pitch right there. I don't know what kind of podcast
you guys over. Let me be clear, because Jim Leonard's gone, so I don't feel that confident anymore in our linebackers. But yeah.
No, you fit it in Pittsburgh, Dan, because they love their Wisconsin Badgers. So all they do is draft Wisconsin defensive players. Even Isaiah Loudermilk, one of the rotational linemen from Wisconsin. So Herbig, the first injury report's about to drop here on Thursday. It's looking unlikely. He was out last week. Tomlin said there was no status change on him for this week, and so I'm going to assume that he's out. Pittsburgh did get back Alex Highsmith. That's going to be important for their pass rush, but Herbig probably will not play.
And tell us a little bit about the pass rush and about the defensive scheme for the Steelers this year.
It's really relied on the front 4. Their blitz rate is, I haven't run the updated numbers, but it's around 21, 22%, which is about a decade low compared to what Pittsburgh has normally run. Now, there's some green dogs and occasionally blitz the safety, but they really have been just, trusting their front 4 or, when they're a nickel or their base, defensive line to get home and not really sending extra people rushing 4 and dropping 7. So that's been the main strategy up front. It's been a lot of zone, a lot more cover 3. They don't man up quite as much, not maybe traveling Porter as much on opposing number 1s. We'll see how they handle Porter and Neighbors. That'll be, of course, a big matchup to watch this week. But yeah, it's really kind of been a simplified scheme, a lot of spot drop zone. They don't really pattern match quite as often as other teams. They've not been as exotic with their blitz schemes as other teams or in the past. They do some post-snap rotation, but it's one of the lower rates in football. But you still got to find number 39 and Minkah Fitzpatrick, and they'll rotate him and spin him down sometimes from deep half to lurk coverage underneath or trying to rob a crossing route. So finding him will certainly be key. But the defense is really predicated on playing simple, playing fast. It's a really good defense, a ton of talent. So when you have that kind of talent, you don't want to overcomplicate things. You just want to let those guys go out there, make plays, and they really have made a ton of plays.
Fast, simple, and physical is how I viewed Terrell Austin's defense after watching the Jet tape. But I'll say this, man, like TJ Watt doesn't really move around at all. He's just going to see the right tackle. Is that he just sees the right tackle most of the time, right?
Correct. I mean, I think he's played maybe 3 snaps other than left outside linebacker this year. He's began his career at right outside. They switched him to left outside. He's more comfortable there. He's more dominant there. He's talked about. And yeah, there's a balance there because you know how teams will attack TJ Watt, but you also know how teams will attack TJ Watt. And so you're basically eating up the tight end or the running back or the slide protection. You know exactly how, you're going to block things up every single play, and that allows other opportunities elsewhere. So if you guys want to, put all your attention to Watt, as you should, then there's going to be a consequence offensively to that, sending only 3 out in the pattern, not having the tight end as involved. I know the tight ends aren't catching a lot of passes in New York this year, but still you have less guys out there just as eligibles for Pittsburgh to have to cover. So yeah, Watt really has been just same side, but they will stunt too. If you're going to have some chips, they're going to have some responses to stunt and twist him inside. So there's a little bit of mix up in how they rush Watt.
Dan, I think this could be a real problem for the Giants having TJ Watt against Jermaine Illuminor, because without Andrew Thomas out there, it's been Josh Azudu starting at left tackle for the Giants. And last game, after he gave up 2 third down sacks to end the second and third drive for the Giants just put basically 2 tight ends on that side and to help him out. But with TJ Watt on Jermaine Illuminor, you're going to need a tight end on that side, and there's still going to be a tight end on the side for Alex Highsmith and Josh Azudu. So I'm wondering how the Giants are going to combat this.
Yeah, I don't know if there is any kind of real solution in my mind, at least, to combat this, because it's just going to be a lot fewer guys eligible. They're definitely going to give help on at least the left side with Azudu. They might put Illuminor on an island, Nick, against TJ Watt, which doesn't sound like a good thing.
Running back releasing to chip.
Yeah, we'll get some chips. Yeah. It's going to be rough. It's going to be a rough game on offense. I think everyone's well aware of that for the Giants. If we're just speaking of this frankly, it's going to be a tough for Daboll to game plan and to scheme up offense here. This is probably the toughest task I think he's had so far as a Giants coach. Maybe last year was tougher when he had some of those games on the offensive line, but this is a really tough defense, maybe the toughest they've faced in the last 2 or 3 years for this matchup. Now, let me ask you about Joey Porter. During the last draft class, there was, a debate as to Deonte Banks and Joey Porter. Who was the better corner, who should be drafted. They were such different players, but still. Has Porter been, I've heard really good things about Porter so far, and we've kind of had a mixed bag when it comes to Deonte Banks with the Giants. Has Porter been as good as advertised?
I think just about. I think he's a player that's continually gotten better, and I think he's improved in other areas than just kind of being the pure press man cover corner he was billed coming out of Penn State. I think his zone coverage is better. I think his tackling has improved. It can still be a little hit and miss, but there's certainly 1-2, and he's been more physical, been more aggressive, and just been more competent as a tackler. But yeah, Pittsburgh drafted him to be their number 1 corner, and he has been. That was basically midway through last season. He cracked the starting lineup, and it's been the number 1. Like I said earlier, they've been maybe traveling him a little bit less because they've really been impressed by the play of Dante Jackson, the cornerback starting opposite, who they acquired in the Deontay Johnson deal. But I think when you face a guy like Neighbors, his skill set, that really kind of suits Porter pretty well. So a little bit of penalties, a little grabby. Anytime you're kind of a big, long guy like him, you're going to try to push the envelope and try to get away with some stuff, and sometimes it burns him. I wish he would wear gloves that correspond with the opponent's jerseys. He always wears kind of whatever color gloves he wants, and you kind of it's a little more obvious there for the ref. Like, but overall, I think Porter's been certainly as advertised, and to get him at the top of the second round. I mean, he wouldn't have shocked me had they taken him in the first round that year, and to get him there at number 32. I mean, they could have traded out because there were teams trying to trade up for Will Levis. They could have gotten a great deal and moved back and gotten a ton of picks, but they won Porter and they got him for good reason.
So, Alex, similar question that I asked you about offense, only now it pertains to Terrell Austin. So, do you see Terrell Austin deviating at all from what he's put on film this season against a quarterback like Daniel Jones with the offensive line situation that the New York Giants have right now, and with a star receiver like Malik Neighbors? Do you think they're going to try to get physical with Malik Neighbors at the line of scrimmage? Will they roll coverage towards Malik Neighbors? Or do you think they will dial up the blitz a little bit more to get after Daniel Jones and hit him early or often? What's your opinion on that?
I would say not many changes. Pittsburgh is very much, we're going to trust our players are better than your players. And with all due respect, the Giants offense is not so threatening that it's going to really alter the game plan overall. There's going to be some tweaks against the Jets, for example. They showed a little more sim pressure look to at least give the appearance of blitzing, to kind of put some stress on Rodgers, get the ball out quicker. There'll probably be some wrinkles in how you handle Neighbors, maybe some bracketing, some shadowing that way. But I think overall in the margins, it's going to be the same base scheme. You have to deal with the quarterback designed run game, but Pittsburgh has seen that. They see Justin Fields in practice each day. They see Lamar Jackson twice a year. And so defending those concepts are not going to be anything new to the Steelers. So I would just say overall, like I said earlier, his defense is built on not overcomplicating things, not making things so game plan specific, just having kind of the same base game plan, a couple of wrinkles, couple different coaching points and situational type things. But overall, they want to be who they are because they believe they can be a better defense than your offense.
If there is one weakness on the Steelers defense the Giants can maybe exploit, what would that be?
I mean, it's been a really good unit overall. I'm trying to think about maybe one particular weakness. I think Pittsburgh has had some communication problems, so it's been a lot of self-inflicted wounds. I mean, he had a really good game last week, and so the context changes a little bit. But attacking that slot corner and Beanie Bishop Jr., undrafted rookie free agent, again, he picked off Rodgers twice last week, was a real catalyst to why the Steelers came back and won that game. But you talk about, you want to throw a Porter, you want to throw a Jackson, maybe you go after a Dante Jackson. Can you get Neighbors inside a couple times, get Pittsburgh in some bad matchups? That may be a possibility, but there's not a lot of really obvious holes in the Steelers defense because they've been really strong, and the errors they have made have been really more self-inflicted type of wounds. So maybe you can try to use some bunches and some different releases to try to create some confusion for Pittsburgh in coverage. But other than that, it's a tough group to attack.
They might be the best defense in the NFL, really, right now. I'm trying to think in my head, like, who's a better defense right now.
Broncos are probably in the conversation.
Sure.
Vikings until last week, but Pittsburgh's got to be. I mean, does anybody run the football against Pittsburgh?
I feel like I was thinking. That's not even an option. Yeah.
The only thing that's given them some trouble is some of those mobile quarterbacks when you have to defend the threat of that. I know the Colts, for example, their first drive, was Anthony Richardson, and sometimes on those zone reads, because what teams always try to do is to defend TJ Watt is let's run away from TJ Watt. Let's run zone away, and he's unblocked. And he's just going to go ahead and attack from the backside every single time and clean that play up from behind. But when you have a mobile quarterback on a zone fake, for example, read option, you kind of freeze that backside defender, and the Colts had success there. Richardson got hurt. Flacco came in. The Colts run game was not as successful. So the threat of Daniel Jones and his mobility can probably work in the Giants' favor to some degree. But yeah, overall, teams have not had a lot of success running the football. And Pittsburgh has had some slow starts, but they really adjust well after kind of the first drive and certainly after halftime. They really, really adjust well. Over the last 2 weeks, Pittsburgh is outscoring the opponent 44-6 in the second half. And so there's really been good adjustments. And basically, once they kind of see what you're doing, they do a good job with those kind of minor adjustments to lock things down.
That's exactly what they're going to do, Dan. The Giants are going to come out and try to run the zone, because the Giants have struggled running the football this year, Alex, but the successful times where they have employed the run, it's been a lot of duo. It's been a lot of under-center duo. And the Giants haven't run too much of that. They've been sticking to shotgun or pistol zone read type of plays. And I can see them doing the same exact thing. And it's been to limited success. And I think I'm being kind there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Daniel Jones leads you guys in rushing first downs with 15. Kind of just speaks for the run game. Is that, running duo and just trying to go big on big, it's not going to work against Pittsburgh, because that D-line has been excellent with Benton. Hayward is he's 35, might be the best interior lineman next to Dexter Lawrence in football. Wow. And Larry Ogunjobi's been healthy and having a good year. So if you want to try to run, it's more zone read, and inside zone, outside zone, kind of stretching things out a little bit wider is where Pittsburgh is a little more susceptible. If you try to run, physical and overwhelm them, it's just not going to work.
Prepare yourself for quarterback draw, Alex.
Yes. The number of times Daniel Jones run on 2nd and 7 under quarterback draw, but it has been actually fairly effective. And so that is going to be something to consider.
So have you had an opportunity to watch the Giants offense on tape this year, Alex?
Yeah, I just went through my offensive scouting last night. I have not gotten to watch their defense yet.
So what games have you seen on tape from the offense?
The last two. That was the Eagles game, and who was the game?
Cincinnati.
Yeah, Cincinnati. Yeah, I watched.
You haven't seen much, have you?
As far as production goes, no. But let me ask you a question. From your outside perspective, having seen 2 games on tape, what is your evaluation of what you see from Daniel Jones? What does he present to defenses? What are the limitations that you see on tape? Or what is holding back the Giants offense in these 2 games in your mind?
I just feel like there's a lot on his plate, and you guys will speak to this better than I can. I'm just from an outsider, 30,000 foot view, but you guys have to have, I think you guys have the 2nd or 3rd highest pass rate on first down. And even not in the fourth quarter, excluding game circumstance, first half pass rate, still one of the highest in football. The amount of empty you guys run surprised me, given how you've had issues protecting Daniel Jones. You lose Andrew Thomas, left tackle. You guys are still spreading things out, or I'll see the number of times I've seen on 3rd and long, the number of just 3-man routes or 2 outside side adjustment routes with 1 middle route over, stick kind of to the sticks, just a 3-man route that really stresses the defense in no way. I don't know how Jones works with that. It just feels like you're just, destined for failure. So I just feel like there's been really no run game. They're behind the sticks. The line hasn't protected. They're an empty a ton. Play action has not been super effective. The number of times he's been sacked off of play action just in those 2 games. It felt like a ton. He just always was under pressure. So, I mean, I know he's got his own limitations and not the quarterback. I think, they hoped he would be, but there's not really been a whole lot, I think, structurally to support him that's really given him much of a fighting chance.
It's interesting. Yeah, and we'll see if that structural that can improve at all against the Steelers defensive line. I don't know. That feels hopeful to me, at least.
It is funny too, because Alex watched the 2 games where it's like the Giants forgot that they could run the football.
Yeah.
Cincinnati and Philadelphia. Dan and I came back after those after those games. We're like, dude, like they ran the ball like 2 times in the first half. Like, well, that wasn't necessarily consistent with the Giants prior to those 2
Right.
games. And both times it was like, what the hell are they doing? Why are they not establishing the run at all?
Yeah. And I'm curious if that same thing will happen in this game, because I think it was clearly something that was in the game plan from Daboll these past 2 weeks, essentially just looking at the matchup and deciding they couldn't run the football against those fronts and against those 2 teams and the way they were playing them defensively. But I don't think that's going to change all that much facing Steelers. So it'll kind of be a rock meets a hard place. Will Daboll just say, F it, we're going to run the ball?
Dude, I remember when Daboll was the offensive coordinator for the Bills, he would do this shit though. Like, remember back in 2021 when mid-season Josh Allen got sacked by Josh Allen and fumbled, and the other Josh Allen took it back for a touchdown, and Jacksonville ended up beating Buffalo. They were all calling for Daboll's head because they weren't running the football passes at that time. Yeah.
This is a tendency of his as a play caller.
There's a big difference, though, between Josh Allen and Daniel Jones.
Of course. This is a tendency of his, though, as a play caller. It's a good point, Nick. And he gets into these grooves. And I think for him, he just feels like he's hopeless in the run game. But ultimately, if you're this hopeless in the pass game as the Giants have been, you're better off just getting under center, maybe not running into the boxes you wanted and not the looks you wanted, but just running the football just to take a little bit, like you said, Alex, off the quarterback's plate, ultimately, and give him a break. I think Kurt Warner tweeting about this, how like one of the best things you can do for young quarterbacks is just run the football so they get a breather. They can just hand the ball off, heads it, and they just not every play is on them. And maybe that's what the Giants need to do. Take some off the plate of Daniel Jones, like literally speaking, not just figuratively, like literally let him hand the ball off more.
And I feel like, again, you guys know the offense much better than I do, but there aren't a lot of easy wins on first down. First down just feels difficult, where it's not even some boots in the flat. Like Pittsburgh will really utilize that to just get 5 yards on first down. Let's kind of stay on schedule, and so we're not putting ourselves in first or second and forever. So yeah, it's going to be tough for you guys, I think, overall. But I do think one thing you guys have well is some good speed at receiver. Slayton can run. Neighbors is obviously athletic. I know Hyatt's not really playing, I don't think, a whole lot this year, but I know he's got some speed. And so Pittsburgh, I mean, their corners can run, but I know Dallas, they had success down the field, and their receivers that, were backups besides CeeDee Lamb were pretty fast, and guys like Tolbert. So I think some of that team speed at receiver can be an issue potentially.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup. Right? Let's get into some predictions here. Alex, I'll let you start. Give us a score prediction on this game.
Oh, man, I haven't even really thought a great score prediction.
You don't have to do. You can just say, you don't have to pass.
I'll just give one now. Just don't hold me to it. I mean, I think, Pittsburgh has really, it's so rare for Pittsburgh to win by 2 possessions. And the fact they've done it the last 2 weeks has been the most surprising thing of all, because all Pittsburgh does is play low scoring games. My favorite stat to give guys whenever I'm on shows like this is, since 2007, Mike Tomlin was hired, no team has played as many 1-possession games as the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wow. And no team has a higher winning percentage in 1-possession games than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So every game comes down to the wire. It's not been the case the last 2 weeks. I think they kind of come back to earth a little bit. I think the Giants have a good defensive line. I know Thibodeau's going to be out, but man, Lawrence in the middle against Pittsburgh's offensive line that has had so many injuries this year. And then Brian Burns, too, has been what an acquisition that was from Carolina. So I think that can maybe stifle Pittsburgh's run game, collapse the pocket a little bit on a less mobile Russell Wilson. So I think this will be going back to kind of true and blue Steelers, 1 possession, win in the last 5 minutes kind of a game. I'll just say something like 20-17 Pittsburgh will be my early prediction.
All right.
The Giants cover.
I would love for a game like that. I'm a little bit more cynical from the Giants' perspective. The offense has just been terrible the last 2 weeks of not moving the football somehow. And I know there's really nothing to quantify this, but the Giants have been able to move the football on the road. This is probably one of the worst places that you can play other than Seattle, who the Giants went up and beat just a few weeks ago. I have the Pittsburgh Steelers winning this game. I'm going to go with 24-10.
Okay.
I think it's a step in the right direction for the Giants to get in the end zone.
They get in the end zone, at least, I guess. Last week we got the prediction right for the first time, Nick, or I got the prediction right for the first time. I don't remember if you hit some others. I predicted the Giants would lose. I think I ultimately didn't predict it would be as big of a blowout as it actually was, 28-3. I think this week will be a similar looking game in the sense that like the Giants defensive line is going to come out and they're going to stop the Steelers early. They're going to get some stops and some punts. Eventually they're going to be susceptible to some runs. I don't think that Najee Harris and that run game are going to be able to generate as many explosive plays as Saquon Barkley did. But at the same time, I think there's an opportunity for the Steelers, a better opportunity for the Steelers, I should say, to score points on the defensive side of the ball, something the Eagles did not do against the Giants. I think there's very high likelihood for a sack fumble in this game, potentially returned, or an interception, a pick six, or something to put them in scoring range. So ultimately, I think the Giants offense really, really struggles to move the ball in this game. I'm going to say they might be able to score a garbage time touchdown, though. I don't know how we'll see how that goes. I'm going to say 23-10 Steelers will be the final score here. So hopefully,
can I just say just two more quick things? And Dan, I think you made a great point. Pittsburgh is 4th in interception return yardage this year, so they've done a good job being able to capitalize off of that. They picked off a good amount of passes, but had some long run backs. I told a Jets podcast the same thing last week, and it became pertinent. Special teams. Pittsburgh is so good at blocking punts and blocking field goals. They blocked a kick or a punt in 3 straight games, which is it's unheard of. Like most teams are happy if they block 1 kick in an entire season. Pittsburgh has blocked 9 in the last 3 seasons, and so be buttoned up on special teams. Pittsburgh's going to bring it with their punt rush, with their field goal team. I don't know how good you guys are on special teams, but Pittsburgh is a nightmare for the opposition.
I think
there was one block that was called back, but the NFL came out this week and said no, that was clean.
Yeah, it was an extra point, a leveraging call that wasn't correct, but then they ended up blocking that held true a field goal last week. So yeah, Pittsburgh has blocked 2 field goals and a punt, I think, the last 3 weeks. So it's been a block party in Pittsburgh.
We had Isaiah Simmons against, what was that, the Browns?
Yes.
So we had that block.
Yeah.
That's but we've had special teams nightmares, like having a 38-year-old kicker pop up on the injury report on Thursday, or maybe it was Friday, and then not promoting the practice squad kicker, and then him getting hurt on the opening kickoff, relegating the Giants to not having a kicker and having to go for it on 2, resulting in a week 2 loss against a division rival.
Bad stuff this season. Bad stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining the show, Alex. Why don't you let people know one more time where they can find your work?
Yeah, SteelersDepot.com for Giants fans who are interested. On Monday morning, we'll have a full scouting report on the Giants. We always do a scouting report on the opponent, a schematic breakdown, offense, defense, special teams, and an individual player strength breakdown, offense, defense, and special teams. You can follow me on Twitter at Alex_Kozora, and good luck to you guys here on Monday.
Thanks again, Alex. For the rest of you guys, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.